Welcome back to this fourth session of the Tutor to You A Level Sociology catch-up lesson, looking at socialisation. In this session, we're going to look at subcultures and socialisation. In this session, we're going to look at the process of socialisation in relation to working class subcultures, focusing on the work of Hyman and Sugarman. We're also going to look at the formation of anti-school subcultures and then link from these to criminal subcultures. Finally, we'll evaluate subcultural explanations and the role of socialisation in their formation. But what is a subculture? Well, it's a group with its own norms and values that are formed either independent to society's norms and values or as a reaction to them. Subcultural formation involves an individual being socialised into the norms and values of the group, and therefore fits into the core theme of socialisation on the A-level course. First, we'll look at the formation of working class subcultures. When examining the differences in educational achievement of different social classes, Hyman and Sugarman both found that there were differences between the norms and values of the working class and middle class families. As middle class norms were essentially the norms and values of society, working class families were seen to socialise their children into an alternative set of values, and therefore referred to as a subculture. These subcultural values, they suggested, made it harder for working class students to achieve, as they had been socialised into different attitudes and would therefore make different choices. Working class subcultural values were seen as not fitting into the education system, as the working class preferred immediate gratification and were present time orientated. They looked for rewards now rather than thinking about the future. Education preferred the values displayed by the middle class of deferred gratification and future orientation, as this suggested that students were willing to work towards a brighter future, something highlighted by their optimistic attitude. In contrast, the fatalism shown by working class families leads to a lack of resilience in the face of problems and giving up when it gets too hard. A further consideration is the collectivist nature of the working class, being allied to others rather than adopting an individualistic approach that would allow them to go further alone. This loyalty to the ideas of the group meant that working class students were more likely to conform to the norms of the group, particularly when it came to challenging authority, whereas middle class pupils would be more likely to look after their own interests first. These norms were said to be passed down from one generation to the next, leading to a reproduction of working class culture from one generation to the next. This can be seen in the development of anti-school subcultures. These develop as a response to differentiation and polarisation in education, according to Lacey, being placed in lower sets and streams and having opportunities for status denied. This leads to those pupils, usually working class males, rejecting the norms and values of the school and gaining status from conforming to the norms and values of an anti-school subculture instead. The collectivist nature of working class males means they are more likely to see being polarised into the bottom sets as a label of failure, and so join their peers in rejecting education rather than acting individually and striving to prove others wrong. In rejecting education, the group subverts the norms and values of society, gaining status from their peers by deviating rather than looking for status by conforming. There are numerous examples of this across the curriculum, but research from Archer, McIntyre, Ward and Willis all demonstrate the impact of socialisation into different subcultures. And this is not confined to working class boys either. Similar processes occur in ethnic and gendered subcultures as well. But this process of socialisation is linked into a topic area that if you're in Year 12 you may not have covered yet, and we would like to briefly introduce: criminal subcultures. Building on the lack of opportunities for working class males, Albert Cohen suggests that this can lead to the formation of criminal subcultures. Particularly young males will look for alternative ways of gaining status as a result of not being able to achieve through legitimate means, such as education. They will suffer from status frustration and subsequently go on to form deviant subcultures with different norms and values from the rest of society. What these males do as a reaction to blocked opportunities is to develop what Cohen called an alternate status hierarchy, one that had norms and values that would be seen as deviant in wider society. For example, petty crimes and vandalism would be given higher status than having a job. With this alternate status hierarchy in place, individuals would gain status from their peers for conforming to these deviant norms and values. In other words, criminal activity would be a way of gaining the status of the group. Cohen's ideas fueled further research from both Cloward Nolan and Walter Miller. Cloward Nolan found that status was obtained from subcultures also, but suggested that these were based upon the existing criminal subcultures that existed where individuals lived. Miller suggested that the working class had a distinct subculture of their own that they were socialised into. The norms and values of this subculture, what he called focal concerns, were independent of wider society and were a way of life for those in the lower social classes. This is something that was echoed many years later by new right thinkers such as Charles Murray. Criminal subcultures, however, are problematic to define. They're often deterministic about the role of socialisation and make generalisations about the way people act as a reaction to blocked opportunities. They also make assumptions about people's actions based upon their social characteristics and fail to consider the free will or agency shown by individuals in society. Social action theorists in particular will be critical of the way that subcultural theorists portray these individuals. Now it's time to test your knowledge on some of the key terms discussed in this video. In a moment you'll be presented with a conundrum of one of the key terms discussed in the video, and we'll have 30 seconds to solve it. The conundrums are written down in the handout provided, and there are 5 in total to solve. So let's begin. Our first conundrum: Okay, the answer we have is polarisation. Our next conundrum starts now. And the answer was fatalistic. Our next conundrum: answer to this one was collectivist. Let's move on to our next one. And the answer here was subculture. And our final conundrum: was status frustration. Well done if you got those. So that concludes this session of the Tutor to You A-Level Sociology catch-up session on socialisation. In our next session, we'll be looking at how you can use some of this knowledge gained in answering exam questions. See you shortly.